So let's talk AMD's Big Navi 6900 XT versus NVIDIA's RTX 3090. These are going to be the most expensive, top performing GPUs from both manufacturers, but there's a $500 difference between them. How is this going to be explained? Is AMD really looking to take the crown away from NVIDIA? Let's talk about the important things that you must know about these GPUs. Let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell for more content like this. Let's talk about the RX 6900 XT from AMD versus the RTX 3090. Now, the number one thing we're going to talk about is stock and availability. As we know, that's the most important thing. If you can't get the GPU, doesn't matter how good it is. So the RTX 3090, like the 3080, has been sort of out of stock consistently ever since it was announced, and it's not a GPU that was made in any great quantities as well, just because it's so expensive. Now, even though it is difficult to find, I wouldn't say the 3090 is impossible. Certainly people, and my viewers especially, I've seen them comment, they have been able to get them from Newegg, from Micro Center, from Best Buy, even locally. I did a video where I saw the scalpers had priced these at like almost $3,000 when they came out, and then when they saw that the demand for the 3090 at those prices really wasn't there, I watched those prices go down, and now they seem to be a lot closer to MSRP, maybe $200 to $300 more. So even from the scalpers, the prices went down considerably, just because most people already at the MSRP don't feel like the 3090 is the best value proposition. The 3080 certainly won that crown. So if you add in even more expense on top of it, even though it's been out of stock, people just rather go get a 3080 or not get it at all. That's why when AMD announced their 6900 XT at $999, it really piqued people's interest. Now, how's stock going to be? This GPU is going to come out in December. Of course, the 68 and 6800 XT will come out November 18th. AMD staggering the launch makes sense. Hopefully they'll have more of these GPUs in December as well with the 6900 XT, and that is sort of the top dog GPU, so I can see why they want to separate it from the other two. So we don't really know exactly how the launch will be. The Zen 3 launch just happened, and even though it wasn't perfect, it certainly felt a lot smoother than the GPU launches. I even went today, that was launch day, to Micro Center. I was able to get a voucher in order to get one of the Ryzen 5000 CPUs. So that shows you that, stock is there. Places certainly got stock. I saw a lot of people were ordering online as well. So hopefully this is a good indication for AMD. And even at Micro Center, it's not like I waited there. I was there within 10 minutes of the store opening, and there were maybe like 30 something people ahead of me. In fact, I got number 37. So it wasn't anything too crazy. I was still able to get the Ryzen 5000. They even had some RTX 3080s in stock. So hopefully that shows that the stock situation is improving, and hopefully it shows that AMD's launch, even though it's still going to sell out, Zen 3 is still going to be hard to get, at least people had a fighting chance at purchasing these, and it's not like the RTX 3080 launch where they literally disappeared within a few seconds. So then the second important aspect here will be the price. $999 pretty much shocked a lot of people for 3090 level performance on the RDNA 2 6900 XT. Now the RTX 3090 Founders Edition is an MSRP of $1499. Now you have to remember there are various RTX 3090s from third-party partner cards. Some of them, like the EVGA for the Win 3, certainly will be $1,700, almost $1,800, like the Asus Strix. They're going to be a lot more expensive than $1499, but for these purposes, we'll compare the Founders Edition to the RDNA 2 GPU 6900 XT. We can say there's about a $500 difference. So knowing that that price difference exists, let's talk about the performance and if any of this is valid. So the first thing that we have to stipulate, a lot of those benchmarks released by AMD that shows the 6900 XT performing equal or better than the RTX 3090 did have a little bit of software magic in there as well, in the way of some overclocking with Rage Mode. They also have their memory access integration with Ryzen 5000, where basically if you have something like a Ryzen 5900X or any of the Ryzen 5000 CPUs, you can actually unlock more memory performance from an RDNA 2 GPU, therefore giving you what is a pretty significant boost. I've seen some numbers from AMD showing maybe 5 to 10% more frames per second. That's certainly significant. So while yes, maybe an RTX 3090 stock may struggle in some games with the 6900 XT, we really have to wait and see the real world reviews to see if in general it's really going to be able to beat that GPU or if they're going to be fairly similar. But nevertheless, still very impressive that the performance is close and beating it in certain games for $500 less. Now let's talk about a few other things that can help to explain this $500 delta between the 6900 XT and the RTX 3090. Now this is going to come down to VRAM. All of the RDNA 2 GPUs have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, but this is going to be the slower GDDR6, such as you would find on an RTX 3070. This is a little bit lower end RAM. It's not nearly as fast as the higher end RAM, and the VRAM on the RTX 3090 will be the GDDR6X. The 3080 also has the same memory. It's just a newer, faster memory. So AMD certainly has to do more software magic in order to sort of bridge that performance gap in terms of the memory. And it's 16 versus 24 gigabytes of VRAM on the RTX 3090 card. So VRAM is going to be one of the most expensive things to add, especially GDDR6X. So I believe that $500 difference, a lot of it is explained by that VRAM. And as we saw, RTX 3080 owners certainly were complaining about 10 gigabyte of VRAM. A lot of them felt that that RAM allocation in a lot of games were already pushing the limit. Something like Flight Simulator 2020, even certain newer games, if you really max out at 4K, not to mention 8K, it really chews up that VRAM considerably. And not to mention, if you're using these GPUs in the workstation with high-end video editing, you certainly will need as much VRAM as possible. Even if you're doing something like 6K, 8K, even the new 12K cameras, you certainly want to get something like the 24 gigabyte of VRAM RTX 3090, so it certainly can make a difference there. So I guess AMD figured that even for the high-end 6900 XT, they rather have the more available, meaning greater stock and availability of the regular GDDR6 RAM, and also come in at a cheaper price by not having the X variant, and only giving you 16, which is probably going to be more than enough for gamers and everything. 10, we can agree, is probably pushing the limit a little bit. Even the 2080 Ti had 11 gigabytes of VRAM, so 10 on the 3080, I can see how people can possibly be a little bit skeptical about the future-proofing capability. So certainly 16 gigabytes of VRAM does seem to be the sweet spot, and if you'll be able to save $500, in most games it's going to perform just as well. You may not really even need that X variant unless you're doing some type of workstation application with video editing or rendering that you actually need that faster VRAM. Another interesting point of comparison, that's going to be the physical size of the GPU. AMD actually made a point to say that the 6900 XT is the same size as the 6800 and 6800 XT. Now, this is certainly pretty interesting because the Founders Edition 3090 is an absolutely mammoth, huge GPU, dwarfing the 3080 and of course the 3070 and presumably the 6900 XT as well. It's a very big GPU, but this is where I'll kind of say I really actually like that. If I'm going to be paying for a high-end premium GPU like the 3090 Founders Edition, I'm most likely going to put it into a big high-end case. Like I put mine in a Caselabs case, which has an enormous amount of room. So I actually really like that the GPU is massive, solidly built. It's heavy. I like it as a piece of equipment, as a piece of hardware, just aesthetically and physically touching it. I really like the size, and it separates it from every other GPU. That's why I've said time and time again, these new Founder Edition coolers are my absolute favorite. So with that point, having said that, if I was trying to fit this in most normal cases, certainly I would have a more significant amount of problem. So I kind of see AMD's point in saying that their high-end GPU is the same size as the other GPUs. I even mentioned this in my 3070 Founders Edition review. That's such a nice, small, compact GPU. I was able to fit it in a smaller case without any issue. So I certainly understand the need to have a normal size GPU. But on the other hand, I also appreciate the absolute ridiculousness of a massive GPU like the 3090 Founders Edition. And then of course with time, we'll also see other points of contention versus the 6900 XT and the RTX 3090. For example, NVIDIA has been very dominant in workstation applications. In video rendering, their encoder certainly is much superior to the AMD's encoder now, but hopefully with AMD gaining more market share, they'll also encroach on that space a lot more and create a lot more optimized experiences for workstations. Not to mention, AMD really needs to get their drivers together for this generation. As we know, their previous generation, the RDNA first generation, like the 5700 XT, did have several driver issues that took a very long time to get resolved. In general, NVIDIA fixes their issues very quickly, like when the 3080s were crashing near launch. Within a week, they had some driver updates that seemed to fix pretty much all of those issues. So we really have to see if AMD will be able to deliver on stable hardware as well as on stable drivers. That's something that Nvidia, even though the launch was a little bit of a mess, they didn't have too much product for people that wanted to buy it. At least for the most part, after they fixed the crashing issues with the driver update, the GPUs are generally very reliable, and the drivers, if they're not good, they're usually fixed pretty quickly, but for the most part, they're very dependable as well. So AMD will have to at least match that level of precision if they hope to really stay competitive in this market. So certainly we're going to have to see how all of these technologies pan out, especially things like ray tracing and DLSS. We have to remember Nvidia has a considerable advantage in these fields versus AMD, even though AMD has like their rage mode overclocking and the memory integration with Ryzen 5000 CPUs. That certainly isn't enough to take on something like ray tracing performance, where Nvidia currently still remains to be the leader, and that seems to be where a lot of games are going in the future. So we're going to have to see what type of technologies both companies will implement and perfect in order to see which one of these GPUs certainly will come out on top. But there's no doubt that coming in at $500 less and pretty close performance, the 6900 XT has a lot of people, including myself, very excited, and it's certainly very promising because most people did not think that AMD was going to compete with the 3090. We thought tops 3080, that way it's still competing with the high end, but they would leave the 3090 alone. But we were very surprised that they're actually going for that top spot at a cheaper price. So that's a similar move that they did with Intel. We'll see if it's going to pay off in the long run. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.